take a deep breath, take the higher road. That's what they always say, as if they know the way. They won't take it from me. But don't ever doubt yourself, 'cause life ain't just a dream. You make your own, so kick and scream. The people will act with a never-ending force. You never had the chance, so what you waiting for? The day has come, my friend, 'cause this is war. It's time and this is war.
Over the past several years, we have witnessed medical professionals who have courageously stepped forward as servant leaders in the medical freedom movement. These extraordinary individuals embody the true spirit of their commitment to healing, putting patients' well-being above all else, even at great personal cost. These brave doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals have chosen to stand up for what is right, often in the face of immense pressure and adversity. They've risked their careers, reputations, and livelihoods to advocate for informed consent, medical autonomy, and transparency in healthcare. Their sacrifice is profound. Many have faced censorship, lost their jobs, or have been ostracized by their peers. Yet they persist. Why? Because they understand that true healing comes not just from treating symptoms, but from empowering patients to make informed decisions about their own health. These servant leaders have dedicated countless hours to researching, educating, and speaking out about important medical issues that are often overlooked or suppressed. They have fought tirelessly to preserve ethics in medicine, advocating for individualized care over one-size-fits-all approaches. Their commitment to medical freedom isn't just about personal choice. It's about safeguarding the very foundations of ethical medicine. They remind us that health decisions should be made by individuals in consultation with their trusted healthcare providers, not dictated by outside interests. These leaders have shown extraordinary courage in challenging prevailing narratives, always putting patients first. They've become beacons of hope for those seeking alternatives, for those who feel unheard and dismissed by the mainstream medical establishment. Their service extends far beyond their medical expertise. They've become educators, advocates, and champions for patient rights. They've sacrificed their comfort and security to stand up for righteous truth, embodying the highest ideals of their profession. You're listening to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Before we get started today, I do want to encourage our listeners, if you have questions or comments, or perhaps you want to share your own experiences with what you're seeing on the front lines of healthcare, you can now submit those to us by sending them directly to nurses@americaoutloud.com. We will be featuring your questions and comments every Friday on a special Q&A episode with the nurses. We encourage all of you to engage in the battle and find your voice in this fight. But until you are able to do that, we will continue to be that voice for you. Joining me today is an incredible warrior in the fight for medical freedom. Dr. Christina Parks graduated magna cum laude from the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, in 1992 with a double major in biochemistry and molecular biology and chemistry honors. She went on to earn her PhD in cellular and molecular biology from the University of Michigan in 1999, where she did her graduate research in the field of cytokine signaling. Her work focused on defining the mechanisms by which genes are regulated, and she has spent many years studying the biochemistry of how pharmaceuticals, as well as natural substances that enter our bodies, affect the expression of genes and biochemical pathways that are essential to our health and well-being. Her focus is on supporting the body and activating its natural detoxification and healing pathways through bringing signaling pathways back into balance and restoring electrophysiological homeostasis. She has been a stalwart defender of human rights, standing in the gap to warn and protect others of potential harm, and fighting back against tyrannical government overreach and vaccine mandates. Dr. Parks, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. That was a very kind introduction. And I absolutely loved your introduction because it just rang so true about the healthcare workers and scientists who, just everything you said was spot on about, informed consent. And we're researching to just give people the truth so that they can really actually make decisions for themselves.
And you wouldn't think that this is such a rarity. And that's what really, really took me by surprise is that there weren't that many of us speaking out.
No, not at all.
And you would think it's just a given, right?
Yeah, I mean, people are like, "You're so brave," or this or that. I'm like, I don't see it like that. It's like it's just like a no-brainer. It's like I can't not do it. It's just the right thing to do. I didn't debate about it. I didn't think deeply. I'm just like, no, you just have to do this. So it makes no sense to me because it's so natural to me.
Exactly. I feel exactly the same way. It's been really insane, but I have so much respect for you and for everybody that is out there just kind of, just standing up. And here we are 3 years, almost 4 years now into this COVID fight. And it's a fight that's been going, this COVID, is really what shown this system has been broken for a long time, for decades, maybe centuries. Um, but COVID is really what opened so many eyes to it. So there have been people fighting this fight for a good while. But, I've heard you speak and present many, many times. You are incredibly knowledgeable, but you are equally as passionate. So as we get started, I just would, if you could briefly share a little bit about your background and your expertise, and then if you would share with our listeners how you found yourself jumping into the fray for medical freedom.
Yeah, so I remember back in like 1995 in graduate school when they added like chicken pox to the childhood schedule. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I was working in the Department of Immunology. We were literally just cloning the receptors in the immune system. So, like, there's no way we knew what vaccines were doing. I mean, there's just no way, right? So, there was always a sign like, if we knew what we were doing, they wouldn't call it research, you know?
True.
And I was just like, why are they move? And they were moving the vaccines under two, and it made no sense to me what they were doing. And when they said, the CDC said, we see no evidence that vaccines cause autism. The way they phrased it was like, oh, they mean they haven't looked and they don't intend on looking. And so I saw a lot of red flags, but I really didn't understand the issue. But it was on my radar continually. And I ended up getting out of science because I just didn't like the way it was done. And going into teaching to try to affect young lives. And I remember telling my students, vaccines are going to be the issue of our day. And I was just seeing more and more neurological damage in the children, and teenagers, and I knew that it was some sort of confluence of the vaccines and the toxins in the food, and and it was like, what is going on? At the same time, I never left my research interest. Like I was studying things like vitamin D and nutrition, and really taking my foundation in biochemistry and molecular biology to really understand how to support the body, because I've always had like chronic health issues. So I wanted to know how to be healthier myself and for my family. And I just thought it was fascinating. So because the vaccine issue was just on my radar for scientific reasons alone, I didn't have anyone in my life that was, particularly injured or anything like that. When I adopted my own children, I think they each had like two vaccines. And I remember reading the book. I think it was Bob Sears's book, and he would talk about all these problems, like, well, the intestines can telescope inside themselves, and like blah blah blah, but this one's fine. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And but there was really not that much information. Like that was like the one book I found at like Barnes and Noble or something. And then I saw something by Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, and everything that she does is fully cited. And then I realized that PubMed was online; it was available to anyone. You used to have to be in a lab and have a subscription and pay a fee. And I was off to the races because I found it so interesting. And then I thought, well, I should, show up. And so there was a meeting, Michigan for Vaccine Choice meeting. It was like almost 2 hours from my home, but I thought, well, let me see what's going on. And that's where I met Maya Hahn. And I don't know if you know Maya.
I do know Maya. She's amazing.
It was over then. Like she organized and set up all the events and drug me all around Michigan to speak. She'd be like, by the way, you're speaking at this in 3 days or whatever. I'd be like, okay, And so I brought the knowledge and she organized the events. And now she's working for Children's Health Defense.
Yeah.
And so we really, made quite a pair. And she made a huge, huge influence in West Michigan here. So I was already speaking out, but pretty much very few people or nobody was listening. But I would meet the parents of vaccine children who would say, I did this healing modality and it didn't work for me. Why did it work for this person, but it didn't work for me? And so I would question them, because I was under the impression that, the parent is the expert on their child. And, if they tell me something happened, I can trust them. It's my job to figure out a probable mechanism of injury, right?
Right.
And so I would just keep listening and listening and listening, wishing I could just fix it. I remember spending 4 hours with the parents of the McDowell triplets who all regressed into autism within 48 hours, trying to be like, what have you done? How did this work? And being shocked with things like, yeah, we give our kids vitamin C and they go septic. And just being like, oh, that's not good, and really scratching my head and really, knowing that this is a deep problem, but my degree is in cell signaling. And so of all the people that might be involved, I'm the person who can get out the research and say, what is going on here? And so that's what I've tried to do a deep dive into the vaccines. And they're all different. And unfortunately, the longer and the deeper you look, the worse it gets. Yeah. Truly. I wasn't here to say every vaccine was bad or this or that. There's some that are less bad than others, but they come out with different versions of different vaccines, and some are really, really bad. Yeah. So I really was just following the science and trying to tell parents what's going on with the vaccine so they can have informed consent. But also to really do a deep dive, I needed to understand each type of vaccine to understand how it might be injuring, and then to do the science to try to figure out how we can try to restore health. And a lot of it is immune dysfunction. How can we rebalance the immune system and things like that? So I was, doing all this work, and COVID hit. And I remember someone asked me to speak for 20 minutes. There were like 3 or 4 speakers. And so I went. It was Holland, and it was a church. And I spoke. And when I finished, you could have heard a pin drop. Like, just nobody said anything. And then everybody leapt to their feet and gave me a standing ovation.
Nice.
And it's not because I'm such a great speaker. I mean, I'm a decent speaker, but it was because they were all so acutely uncomfortable with what was going on, and they knew something was desperately wrong, and they couldn't quite put their finger on it. And when I went and showed them the research from Xizing Li from the Wuhan Institute and Ralph Barrick at UNC that have been working on coronaviruses for more than a decade, bat coronaviruses, and making them infect human lung cells, when I showed them sort of the rabbit trail, the crumb trail of how this is all happening, it put all the pieces together for them, and it just clicked and it made sense. And their ovation was because they were grateful that someone made it make sense.
Well, and that's something you have a real gift for that. I will say that is one thing that I really, really love about you is that, you're brilliant, and not all brilliant people can convey information in a way that makes sense to the layperson. And you have a real gift for that. You have a real gift for putting that information out there, breaking it down so that people can understand. So I wanted to share that with you, that I think that's one of the things that I really respect the most about you, because you know what I'm talking about. There are people out there that are absolutely brilliant scientists, but they can't even hold a conversation with somebody.
Right. No, and I agree. And I remember had a physics teacher like that was brilliant, but like, who knew what he was saying,
Mm-hmm.
And I was, I was working in high school as a teacher because, I mean, I think that was my calling. And so in a way, I'm kind of doing the same thing, just at a different level. So I had to, I felt like when I went to school, there were so many classes that were so long and painful and tedious, and you'll know exactly what I mean, right? Because you're a nurse.
Yeah.
And I was like, there has to be a better way to teach this. And I actually wanted to be a dancer, so I'm extremely kinesthetic. And so I just realized that, actually reading books is not actually my preferred method of learning. And so when I taught protein structure in high school, we're using pipe cleaners and beads and linking them together, your disulfide bond, and, like we're folding them, and they're like, well, I'm not sure if I'm in college or kindergarten. I'm like, that's just fine. So I think that that was always a calling, and it really is a calling, because when I was in high school teaching, I really taught to relevance, like how is biology really relevant to your life, and what do you really need to know? And I think that it really does take someone who is an expert in the field to pull all the pieces together. Um, and so I think that's someone who just kind of went through a couple of years of school and started teaching high school biology or whatever, and doesn't have a lot of life experience or whatever, or a lot of experience in their field, doesn't always have the ability to pull it all together and tell a story.
That's very true. That's very true. So you sound like you're kind of like me in that I didn't come into the fight necessarily anti-vax. I had received all of my vaccines and my child had received his vaccines. I really wasn't awakened to this whole vaccine issue really until COVID. I was actually very pro vaccine, but not militantly pro vaccine. Like if you told me you didn't want one, I would, okay, that's your choice and you're right. But I always encourage vaccines, including the flu shot every year, because, that's kind of how we're indoctrinated as nurses. Like we think that that's just part of our existence as a nurse, as that we're supposed to be encouraging these types of things for people, even though nurses get probably actually zero, zero education on vaccines. The only education we get, and I say this often, is safe, effective, and necessary. That's it. And doctors receive little more education than that on your
Right. And
mainstream doctors.
I think that the problem is that most people, like, you're highly educated, you went to school, and you assume that whoever your colleagues are that developed the vaccine or tested them, you're assuming they did their job just like you can be depended on to do your job, right?
Exactly.
And so I think that there's a lot of assumption going on, and most people don't realize there's no liability. And I think that that's where researchers or scientists are a little bit different, because we really have a very critical eye to seeing problems and to figuring out the very, very minute details of things. And I had seen, like, I was aware when the Andrew Wakefield thing happened, and I was like, why are they destroying this guy because he said that the measles vaccine, which is a live virus vaccine, could cause gastrointestinal problems? I don't even understand that. And because there were other labs doing similar work, but it was because he spoke out. But we didn't have the internet like they had now, so you only got parts and pieces of what was going on. But it was very, very disturbing to me. And so I was aware of the childhood vaccines, although I continued to learn. Like, people are like, remember they had this one ad where this kid gets out and he's got a folder and here's all the evidence that vaccines cause autism. He opens it and there's nothing in there. I've been researching this for about 7 years, between 20 and 40 hours a week, and I'm not done finding evidence.
Right. Exactly.
So,
And there's got to be something. I mean, when you look at, we're now at I believe it's 1 in 36 children are now on the spectrum. And when we think about not just the autism, but the rise in autoimmune disorders, food intolerances, all of the chronic diseases that we have just been taught as just part of, we're just conditioned to believe this is just part of our everyday existence, and here, take a pill for it.
right. But I'm old enough that nobody had those in the past, like
Exactly.
very, like 1 in 1,000 people. And that, like, the studies that showed like rates of autism at like 1 in 10,000 and greater, or, less than 1 in 10,000, those were actually really good studies.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know what I mean? Those were actually really well done studies, like in the 70s and before that. So this idea that, oh, we just weren't catching them. And if we weren't catching them, we'd have all of these severely autistic 70-year-olds, which we don't.
And it's interesting to me that when we look at the pharmaceuticals, which I think play a significant role in chronic disease as well, but if we look at pharmaceuticals, they don't have any problem giving us the whole laundry list of side effects that come with these pharmaceutical medications. Why is it so different with vaccines? It's as if vaccines can't cause a single side effect. But
I know, it's crazy, right?
I don't get it.
Well, and what I also don't get is, as you advocate for more natural remedies that are, many have like thousands of years of use, right? In traditional cultures. And, the medical institutions are like, no, that's going to kill you. Like, I gave my own daughter raw goat's milk when she was an infant. And And you would have thought, my practitioner was a very nice woman, was like, oh, that, she might get a disease and this and that and the other and blah, 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 blah. But then when you look at the laundry list of side effects for my daughter had hemiplegia. She had had a brain infection in Ethiopia when we adopted her. And so she had gastric reflux and some other problems, and she was on seizure meds. When you look at the laundry list of side effects, like, we were changing her seizure meds and like, well, this one, might be better, but it can cause Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And I know as a nurse, you're probably familiar with that. It's when the skin just all peels off the person's body. I'm like, oh, well, that's not
Yeah, that
upsetting or
doesn't
problematic.
sound good.
Yeah, I just was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, but they never seem to mention like the potential for any type of side effects with vaccines, which I've always found very suspect.
Yes.
And I don't know, but I'm starting to really be of the belief that we are all vaccine injured on some level, and some of us have just never connected the dots. I have multiple autoimmune conditions. Most of those cropped up within 6 months of me getting into the medical field. And what happens when we get into healthcare is we get a 3 series Hep B.
Hep B vaccine. Yep.
Yep. And all of my autoimmune conditions, I never connected the dots probably until a couple of years ago. When I started thinking about it, I was like, well, when was I? I was, diagnosed with psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis and all of these autoimmune conditions right around age 19. And it was like 6 months after I got into healthcare. So
Right. And the Hep B, I believe, even in the inserts, it says that there's increased risk of autoimmune issues.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I've actually been doing a lot of my work is looking at the chronic immune activation caused by the vaccines that actually leads to autoimmunity. And it's not the only thing that leads to autoimmunity. There can be other things in a perfect storm, kind of an issue. But because, autoimmune disease, and once you have one, because it's caused by, I believe, hyperactivation of the immune system.
Yeah.
And so, you heal your leaky gut, you might walk that back a little. So I'm really trying to build a model, and it's based on actually peer-reviewed science, so that just a lot of people aren't looking to see where that's at, because so many people have autoimmune issues now. We've got to do something. Like, the quality of life that people have with all of this is just so terrible.
Right, exactly. It really is. And the first thing that they'll do is they'll try to they'll put you on a biologic. I was on biologics for many years. I recently, within the last 3 years, decided that I didn't want to take those any longer. You could call me crazy. I just was not comfortable injecting myself with pharmaceutical products any longer. But they worked for a while. But my problem is that nobody ever said to me, Kimberly, if you changed your diet, you could resolve this. You could remove the inflammation in your body, and you could resolve your issues with autoimmune diseases. What they would give me are all of these lotions and salves and creams and all of the things that never worked. And then they said, well, then the only option for you is to go on these biologics, which have just a laundry list of horrific side effects. I was so scared. I think it took me 5 years of them pushing them on me before I finally agreed to it, because I was just at a point where it was just really debilitating to my life, to my self-esteem. I wanted to clear my skin, and so I did it, and it worked. But I actually started cropping up more autoimmune conditions after that. So I think that it just kind of all.
Yeah. And what's crazy is, like, I worked in a field of the actual receptors, the JAK2, the cytokine kinases that they're actually blocking. So, like, these modern medications, the antibodies and the inhibitors, one of the major ones that they use for autoimmune are JAK inhibitors. And I'm like, I worked on that signaling pathway. And I guess the thing is, like, I realized that, like, those are ubiquitous. Like, they signal everything. And so when you shut that down, you're shutting down your entire immune system and other stuff too. And, JAK2 signals for growth hormone, right? So you're shutting down your growth if you're a young child or something. So it's just crazy to me that we're just shutting down everything. And that's how pharmaceuticals work. And so that's why people end up getting infections, and they tell you, watch out, don't take a live viral vaccine or it could kill you because you have no immune system. And it's just crazy to me how arrogant they are to think that they can just push these into people's bodies and and not be responsible for the consequences, I guess.
Right. And I'll tell you, that's why I was so hesitant in the very beginning when they rolled out. Well, there were many reasons why I was hesitant when they rolled out with the COVID-19 vaccines. And the least of which is the fact the speed at which it came out, the warp speed. I was like, this is like, I would rather wait a little bit. But my biggest concern was that it was my autoimmune conditions. And if you remember in the very beginning, they were not recommending them for people who had autoimmune conditions. And then all of a sudden, they were like, oh, no, it's fine. Get in line with everybody else. You need to get your shot. They were mandating them, or they were trying to mandate them, particularly for healthcare workers. And I asked my doctors, I had 3 different doctors that I was seeing, and I asked each and every one of them, what has changed? 2 weeks ago, they were saying not to do it. Can you show me the data, or what has changed to make it safe for me to take this vaccine, if you want to call it that? It's a term I use loosely. I'll say that. And they couldn't answer me. And they were almost as if it were a scripted answer. All 3 of them said to me, we just feel like this is the only way out of this pandemic. Well, you cannot vaccinate yourself your way out of a pandemic. We know that.
Right. Well, and it never prevented transmission from the very beginning.
Exactly.
And the thing is, I really do believe we're responsible, especially if you're a medical care worker, for finding out the truth. If you're taking a stance, then you better know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And they couldn't answer these questions. And to me, it's not informed consent. And I resigned my position from bedside nursing. Well, that's a whole other story. That was just due to the hospital protocols that were harmful and oftentimes killing my patients. But, when I left the bedside, I started working from home doing telephone triage nursing. And they wanted me to recommend the vaccine for everyone. They wanted me to recommend it for children. But worse than that is they wanted me to call it safe and effective, period. We literally had a scripted answer. If somebody called and asked if this vaccine was safe, we had that answer, yes, period. The vaccine is safe and effective, period. We would have no way of knowing that. We had no data.
I know. So like you're
not
lying.
informed
I mean,
consent.
you're lying, you don't have
Exactly.
any idea what it is,
Yeah. The most they would get out of me was we just don't have the data. That was the stock answer that I had. And I knew I was going to get in trouble eventually. They record all of those phone calls. I was like, oh, they're going to get me. And eventually I just, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I feel like I'm lying to people. Well, not really lying to them because I'm not giving them. I started talking about things like natural immunity and antibodies and all of those taboo subjects. But eventually I was like, this is ridiculous. And I ended up resigning. I had thankfully, prayerfully been exempted from the mandates as a work from home employee, but I just felt like I could not go on any longer in this farce of a healthcare system that is encouraging.
I cannot even imagine
poison, because the short-term results that we were seeing were alarming. There were enough to be throwing up the flag of safety signals, but nothing was happening. They weren't investigating, and they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing for a shot in every arm.
Crazy. Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine being in that kind of environment. Feel very fortunate that I was working from home and, I can't even imagine watching my patients die. My dad died with COVID from hospital neglect. So, I mean,
it was rampant. It was rampant. It was awful what was happening. And I will say it's really difficult when you're in it, when you're in the midst of it, to really see, because we all just think in the very beginning, it was so chaotic. And we all just thought, we're doing the best that we can. We're doing the best that we can. And we can't understand why this is so different and why all of our patients, despite all of our best efforts, everybody was dying. I can literally remember 2 or 3 people maybe that survived. Wow. Everybody died. And it took me a while to understand, but I started questioning the remdesivir. Why are we continuing to use this? It's doing more harm than good. These patients are already past the replication phase. It doesn't make any sense. And I would ask all of these questions, and the only answer I would ever get from the attendings was, it's protocol. It's protocol. It's protocol. But when I saw them pushing intubation, early intubation, when patients weren't even in distress, I mean, that was it for me. And that's when we know that it's not that they're dying from COVID, because we don't see anybody pulling bodies off the streets or out of homes. We only see patients dying in hospitals because they're dying of the treatment, not of the virus.
Right. And the thing was, I was speaking out at the top of my lungs, and like no one knew who I was except for this small report of people in West Michigan who were seeing me speak live because I was super censored. So the government was censoring me before anyone even knew who I was. So what does that tell you?
Exactly. And nobody, I'm just a nurse. People hate when I say that. I'm like, I'm just a nurse. I had worked in a small ICU in a small town in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and people are always like, what do you mean they're killing patients in the hospitals? Because I have spoken out at great length and have done so many media interviews, and I'm trying to warn people. And I'm not saying that, your doctors and your nurses and your hospitals are going into work with malicious intent to murder people. That's not what's happening, but their failure to advocate, to stand in the gap, and to question anything, their silence is compliance, and it's allowing people to die. And at some point, we have to hold people accountable for that.
Absolutely. Well, and the childhood vaccines, and the fact that they don't have any intention of ever being culpable for all of the damage that they've done. So it's super, super crazy.
Exactly. Well, we're up against a break, but we are going to delve into so much more of this and so much more of the incredible work that you are doing when we come back. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays on the iHeartRadio network. You can also listen on our media player from any web browser anywhere in the world. We have the best in-class apps available on Apple, Android, or Alexa, 24/7. Great Talk Radio. All of our shows go to podcast the following day. You can hear them on apps such as Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeart Podcasts, and many more. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show on Apple Podcasts for me. Don't forget to check out our online store at americaoutloud.shop, where you can find all of the products that we represent on our network at a discounted rate, including an incredible line of products from Chemical Free Body. Their 100% herbal formulations are based on thousands of years of biological system science. Unlike the majority of supplements you'll find on the market, with Chemical Free Body, you won't have to worry about harmful other ingredients, including binders, fillers, or flow agents. Their ultra-safe breakthrough nanosilver technology destroys pathogens, balances the microbiome, and boosts immunity. All of these products are proudly made in the USA and are backed by an unheard of double your money back guarantee. I've made a twice daily Green 85 drink part of my routine, which has led to a decrease in belly bloat and an increase in my energy throughout the day. Use promo code OUTLOUD to save 20% off the Healthy Gut Bundle. I'll catch you on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
It's time and this is what.
Is your gut a mess? 2/3 of Americans suffer because of gastrointestinal issues, and I was one of them. That is why we created a 3-step, doctor-formulated, completely natural gut reboot system that you can do at home in just minutes a day. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/outloud today. Get the Malcolm Healthy Gut Bundle, reboot your gut and your energy, and save 20% on your first order.
Trouble getting to sleep and staying asleep is infuriating. Your mind races, you toss and turn. Nutrition company Healthy Cell created REM sleep to help you quickly fall asleep, stay asleep, and sleep deep. Unlike other supplements that don't work, REM sleep is not a pill. It's a gel you swallow with ultra-absorption of science-backed ingredients supporting all 4 stages of sleep. Go to healthycell.com and use code OUTLOUD for 25% off your first order. Risk-free. Love it or your money back. Guaranteed. Healthycell.com. Code OUTLOUD.
Clean, pure, with premium ingredients. Global Healing's Pure Plant Protein offers 20 grams of protein per scoop, and it's the perfect way to maintain and build lean muscle while indulging yourself. It combines enzymes and probiotics to maximize nutrient absorption, improving digestion and your gut health. Available in vanilla and chocolate flavors, elevate your protein consumption while supporting your overall wellness with Pure Plant Protein. Go to americaoutloud.shop and get 15% off using the code OUTLOUD. Global Healing, giving you the power to take control of your health naturally.
Many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Our goal is to herald the voice of genuine liberty at AmericaOutloud.news, a place where you'll find the naked truth expressed with the patriotic heart. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. America Out Loud Talk Radio. Liberty and justice for all.
Welcome back to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Wherever you're listening from today and whatever you're doing, I thank you for giving me the gift of your time. Be sure to make AmericaOutloud.news your daily stop for all the latest news and happenings. We all must do our part and share the stories, the articles, the podcasts, and videos so we can help secure America's future. If you're just joining us, I've been talking with molecular biologist and medical freedom warrior, Dr. Christina Parks. Let's jump right back in. Dr. Parks, thanks again for being here.
My pleasure.
You know, we've had a great conversation thus far. I really want to talk about on the other side of this break. I really want to get into just the incredible work that you've been doing. You have a website. It's called, it's VITA, right?
VITA, VITA, which is Vaccine Injury Treatment Teaching Alliance. I didn't want to say treatment because I get all upset when you say words like that. But so it's Vaccine Injury Teaching Alliance.
I love that because Vita also in Latin means life.
I chose that. Yeah. And that was actually Amanda Damien came up with that. And I ran with it because I thought this is what we're about. We're not about the negative. We're about promoting life, promoting recovery, promoting informed consent, and promoting answers. And it actually started when Amanda Damien asked me, she was actually organizing Defeat the Mandates. Mm-hmm. And she's like, we want to get the doctors together to see if we can figure out what's going on with vaccine injured. She was vaccine injured herself. And so I said, yes, I'll do it. And the idea was, we wanted to put all our heads together in 2 months, figure out something that would help everybody, but that's not really how it worked. It wasn't that simple, but I did put together an alliance of practitioners. And for a year, we met and to just share, everyone sharing their expertise and their ideas of what might help and what might work. And actually many of those doctors, they all have a free subscription, and there's a doctors only page where they have access to all of those practitioner presentations that were geared for other practitioners. So it originally started as us putting our heads together to figure out what we could do for specifically the COVID vaccine injured. But I also had in mind this idea of one-stop shopping. You see something and then it's gone and then it's censored. And, or if you're a parent looking for information on vaccine injury, people used to always go to Autism One, and then you look for videos, but even now those are censored. And so where is a reliable source of information that you can go back to time after time after time? And I wanted this to be that. I wanted this to be where you could go find information on the childhood schedule. Gene therapy was what I learned in graduate school. That's what a degree in molecular biology teaches you. So information on the COVID vaccine that's reliable and understandable, but also healing modalities and recovery protocols. And, even I have a whole thing called Figuring It Out that, tells you, if you think you have POTS, what tests do you need? If you think you have PANDAS, what tests do you need? And if you don't know what those are, then you need to go to that section and read about them, right?
Yeah. So it's really a great, valuable resource for practitioners, especially for nurses like myself and for other practitioners that we have at Remnant, because like I said, we are not extensively trained in this area, but we have the desire to truly help our clients find out and get to the root cause of what's going on and how do we address these issues. And a website such as yours, this platform is incredible. As I am a member of this, and I think it's an incredible resource. So I would encourage other practitioners and just really everybody to become a member, because it is that great information. It's very easy to understand and it's affordable.
Right. And that was my goal. If I could have it for free, I would, but I actually have to pay for the website. I have to pay my web designer. I've got to pay, and I actually haven't used a dime of it for myself. I raised some of the money, but I'd say I probably spent 20 grand of my own money to put this website up.
I don't think people don't understand that a lot of what we do, it can seem at times to be very, very thankless. And like you said, we would do every bit of this for free if we could. But unfortunately, these types of things, they cost money. It costs money to host a website. It costs money to be able, even your time. I mean, for myself, I haven't worked in 2 years because I've been, putting all of this together, building Remnant and doing all of these things that I'm doing. I have yet to take a salary for myself. I'm putting most of my own money because, I mean, times are tough. People are not donating. We'll just say that.
Right. And I'm fortunate that, I'm a consultant for a particular supplement that I really believe in. Otherwise, I didn't just take
Right.
something. I was like, I have to let people know this is the real deal, that this is something that can heal their body. So fortunately, that's what's been paying the bills. And I did work for America's Frontline Doctors for about a year and a half as well. And so I was very fortunate that God provided, but yeah, basically all of that money went into me working on this. And I can spend hours, days researching scientific papers to try to come up with ideas to kind of come up with answers to, and one of the things you'll see on the website is everything is fully cited, or, it has those key papers. And so if I say something, there's a scientific paper or 10 or 20 to back it up. And so it's a great place for practitioners so that they can say, oh my gosh, and here's the paper, here's the research. And I made sure to put a link in it. So all you do is go click, and then there you're at. And so taking the time, my goal is to download everything that I know in a lot of it's in bite-sized chunks. I do have some longer videos, but in bite-sized chunks for people to digest. And you can go back to it again and again. So like when you forget what the methylation cycle was going about, you can go back and watch it again. And I'm going to have like methylation cycles for dummies, and then a step up for practitioners, and then maybe a step up for after you've watched all of those 10 times, right?
Yeah. But I think it's so interesting to me because there are like the doers, and then there are the people with resources. They never seem to be in the same camp. And I always try to figure out a way, like we've got to figure out a way to kind of marry the doers with the people with the resources. I have all of the passion that you could ever want, all of the dedication to doing what I'm doing, but I don't have is the resources. And I so that's why it's so important for people to support those who are out there and doing this type of work, because not everybody, like, we talked a little bit about this when we stopped for break, is that, we're just normal, regular people. And, honestly, we don't have all of the answers, but we are out there and we are researching and we are doing what we can. I've heard this so many times. I'm sure you have heard this as well. I've heard people talking to me and thanking me for speaking out and saying things like, I wish I could do that, but I have a mortgage to pay and bills to pay. We have all of those things too. So
yeah, I had a son in college and a special needs daughter, and right in the middle of it, I got a divorce.
wow.
And so here I am on my own trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for my son's college, take care of my special needs daughter, travel around the country, like build a website.
Exactly. It's so
Right?
people don't understand all that it takes to do these things. And then, you have people that will reach out, like, and I wish I could help every single person and answer every single question. But I mean, there are only so many hours in the day. People don't understand the amount of inquiries that we get.
Exactly. And it's really overwhelming, and it's really sad that people think like you're stuck up because you've got to balance your life. And we're like 3 years into this. And I know, like, for everybody globally, donations are down, whether it's America's Frontline Doctors or Children's Health Defense, because everybody's kind of in a state of burnout, right? And the economy, food is through the roof. And so, but we're still out here working. We're still out here trying to. And so what happens, like you have such a great idea, and we need these alternative nursing programs. We need, nursing that comes into your home. If my dad had been able to get at home nursing, because the problem was as soon as they put him in, his oxygen saturation dropped too low. And so they called the ER. I was trying to manage his care from Defeat the Mandates, actually. And they took him to the hospital, and then he couldn't get the ivermectin or all of the things that I had them giving him. And they said they were going to release him the next day, but then they wouldn't. And you know how it goes. But, so we need this nursing program that you're giving. And then when the next emergency hits, everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, where's the alternative healthcare? And we're all like, we're trying, like, we're picking up sands on the side of the road to
Exactly. Like we're out here and we're doing, I mean, we are putting in the work. We're putting in the work every day. And like, my membership, it's $30 a month. I mean, our services cost more, but it's $30 a month to be a member. And we do have all of these resources, and we have access to these incredible practitioners and all of this, information and education and advocates that will really stand in the gap for you. I mean, we've helped in medical kidnapping cases, which has just become, unfortunately,
Wow.
very prevalent in this country. And we've seen CPS weaponized. We actually assisted in getting a 4-year-old that was medically kidnapped out in Palo Alto, California. Our team was able to get her out of this situation where they very nearly murdered this child. So
Wow.
it's just been, the value. And when we look back on all of the patients that I watched die at the bedside, we cannot overstate the value of having an advocate or just keeping you out of the hospital.
Right, that's what I'm talking about. There's so many things you really didn't need to be. I know a friend of mine, her husband had COVID. She went to the hospital like 3 times, and he sat in the hallway. Like they did nothing for him. He ended up coming back home and dying at home, which I'm grateful for that he died at home and not in the hallway somewhere in a hospital.
Right.
But it was ridiculous because they weren't doing anything for them. And she just needed compassionate care. Like,
Right.
because he had already had cancer, she knew the writing on the wall, it looked bleak, but just like treat people like a human being, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, people are starting to realize very quickly, that, and they become more and more distrustful with this mainstream healthcare system, that they are going to be safer at home with the nurse, and we are able to provide that supportive care. We can get them an oxygen concentrator, IV fluids, or sometimes that's all that they need, some
That's
ivermectin.
all that my father needed.
Yeah, sometimes that's all that they need, and they will get over that that illness. Most of the people, even our older population, our elderly population with multiple comorbidities, fared very well, even without treatment. They fared very
Mhm.
well as long as they stayed away from those hospitals. They did okay. And sometimes it was a little bit of a rough road there for a minute, but they would ultimately get over it. I think it was like 80% or something. I don't remember the
Right. And it
exact
was so
number.
frustrating to me to have to say, well, take him to the hospital because we had an oxygen machine, but it wasn't, like as good of one as we needed. And as soon as the EMS came and they put them on their machine, his saturation shot up to 90%. And I was
Yeah.
just like, oh. So they said, well, we'll send you home with an oxygen machine tomorrow, but then they didn't. And, he had some underlying kidney issues that we didn't realize about, but that's not really the issue. And the issue isn't even whether he would have still died or not. It's getting the care that the person needs so that like then you can find out, right?
Right, right. And it's just, the inpatients, during the protocol, the height of the pandemic, we're isolating patients, which to me was just horrible. It was horrifying to me what was happening. I stood in the room with my patients the whole time. I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of this virus. I've never been afraid of COVID. And actually, I worked in the ICU directly caring for these COVID patients, and it took me well over 2 years before I even got it. And here I was on immunosuppressants, all of these things. I'm at very high risk and still never got COVID. And I wasn't
Wow.
one that I never masked it, out in the community because I understand how masks work and that they don't to stop aerosolized viruses. So I was never one, I wasn't masking. I wasn't doing any of the preventative measures or whatever. Um, and I did just fine. So I think that, just staying away from the hospitals is really the key to staying healthy and well. And the part of being an ICU nurse that really bothered me the most was all of the disease, despair, all of the devastation that we saw. This is even pre-COVID. It was all completely preventable with lifestyle modifications, and that's why I am so passionate about the work that we're doing at Remnant
Right.
Healthcare, and we are looking at patients. From all of our nurses are trained in functional medicine so that we can look at everything from a root cause approach, find that root cause and eradicate it versus just treating everything with a pharmaceutical that's
Pharmaceutical.
really going
Yeah,
to give you
and
10 more
that's where
products.
my website, I have 60 pages of like normal at-home care. What to do when your child gets a fever. You don't have to give them Tylenol. Here's another way to treat it. And so giving people these alternatives, how to nebulize hydrogen peroxide or, iodine or something. And so, all of these different, like I actually had a wart, and apparently you can put apple cider vinegar with the mother on it and it goes away. And I've been trying to get rid of this wart for years. And I was like, wow. And so I had partnered with a friend of mine who was providing some of those solutions. And so that's what we need to educate. We can't wait until the next crisis to start educating ourselves, because the crisis is not the time to try to figure out how to deal with whatever. We have to have our at-home emergency kit of vitamin C and
Yes.
and maybe like bentonite clay, or different things, or activated charcoal, so if you got food poisoning or whatever. So we need some of those things, and we need to know how to use them, how to nebulize, how to treat respiratory illness, and then to call a nurse that can come into the home or whatever. So we need to prepare now. And so I know that it's a lull and people are distracted now and they're back into their regular groove. But this is the time to start building those new habits. And like, I have totally new habits since COVID. Like, I had no idea how much like nebulizing and doing some of these natural things would curb, any kind of respiratory illness, like the flu or whatever. I was like, why haven't we been doing this all along? Why did I ever buy those expensive, cold medicines?
Yep. There's so much that we can do in the natural realm, and they'll try to tell you that it's dangerous and all of it. Like, I mean, it's like with cancer treatments, we understand with cancer, the standard of care in this country is chemo, radiation, and surgery, and that's it. They don't even, think about other alternative treatments. They actually call them dangerous. If I ever, God forbid, am diagnosed with cancer, I'm just going to go on record now. I do not want chemo. I do not want radiation. I want all of the natural alternative things. I made a post about this and talked about B17 or apricot seeds in the treatment of as an alternative cancer treatment, and it was flagged, of course, and removed by Facebook. They remove everything I post.
Yeah, I can't post anything on Facebook.
Like, not, they removed my Paul Newman. I said something about Paul Newman being a very handsome man or something like that. And they actually did. They removed that as like misinformation. That's how censored I am. Like, that's how censored I am. But they removed that post on B17 and said that, well, B17 is not actually a vitamin B. Well, we understand that. And then they said, and it can cause cyanide poisoning. So it was a whole other, I got a good laugh out of that. But yeah, unfortunately, basically anything that the mainstream establishment is telling me to do, I'm going to do the opposite. That's where I'm at.
Well, I think that's where a lot of people are at. And that's where I hope to feel the role of actually, my passion is like, I think there's a lot of things that work, even whether we have science to back it or not. We just need to do the science to figure it out. But there are a lot of things, like I was surprised. I was doing some research on plant biochemistry, and I was surprised at how much research verifies like these polyphenols in these plants that actually bind and neutralize SARS-CoV-2 and the spike protein. So there's like so much out there, and these researchers doing the research, but they're not public figures. And so they're like, look, I did this. Is somebody going to share it? And I'm like, I will. Ooh, choose me.
Right.
Choose me.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about. And we don't have very much time left, but I did want to hit this topic with you. I know that you do a lot of work and you are constantly advocating for the vaccine injured. I try to do that as well. And I've had multiple injured have reached out to me, and they feel very discarded, right? They feel like nobody, they said, why aren't these doctors, why aren't they studying us? Why aren't they researching? Why aren't they trying to figure out, like, why are they continuing to make spike protein and all of these things? They want to know, they feel abandoned by the doctors. I think there are so many doctors in this movement that want to study these things. They want to find answers, and we all want to help the injured. Is it a funding issue? That is, I mean, I feel like who's going to fund
Yes, most of us don't have labs. And like Dr. Ryan Cole had a lab, and he got put under so much pressure that he had to sell his lab. Yeah. So it's lack of actual resources and lab space. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
scientific research is very expensive, and it's mostly all funded by the government, by the NIH.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's what, and I think that's what, that makes sense to me. And that's where I feel like that is the main problem. But, I don't think the injured want to hear that. They want answers, and I don't blame them. We all want answers. I think we're all doing
right. And I was just looking at a couple of the papers that I have up of these different natural elements in herbs that bind SARS-CoV-2 and can help rid the body of spike protein, and they're all overseas. right? So the NIH isn't even going to fund them here.
Right.
And that's where it takes a lot of money to do scientific research. So it's these labs overseas that are actually doing a lot of these.
Yeah. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the NIH to never fund any of these research studies, what do you think is a plausible solution for the vaccine injured?
So I just actually launched a spike detox protocol, and some of it's based on Dr. Robin Rose's protocol. She has the medicinals 9, and I really feel like she is a leader in the field of that. And it's based on two things: binding spike protein in the gut, because many people are having a subclinical gut infection that is very persistent and is dumping spike protein, which is then taken all over the body into the brain. And also making sure you have these polyphenols that bind it systemically, that come from things like curcumin and other polyphenols like luteolin, and there's green tea extract. And so we could have been drinking green tea, and that would have actually really helped us during COVID. But we didn't know, but it was published already. So I think that I did have that, and hopefully she will be on Vita in September with her medicinals 9, and it gives you it helps you understand what you're trying to do. So it's not like you have to use, the products I suggest. I'm just trying to give people options, or the products she suggests. Once you understand how to rid the body, you can say, well, I think this product will work, or work with your practitioner, or, whatever. So I think that that's one of the best things that I've seen out there, is this sort of protocol on how to use these to get rid of the spike protein in the body.
Right. And that's something I actually watched your presentation. It was incredibly informative. And that's something that I really want to have my nurses kind of dive into that. I look forward to, I'm going to sit down with you at some point and kind of talk with you about what we're doing at Remnant and what you're doing, and how we can potentially collaborate so that we can help the most injured people to get through this time, because again, they're feeling abandoned, and that is the last thing I want. I know it's the last thing you want. We are doing all of this work not for our own gain, but to help humanity. Really,
right, exactly. Truly. And I hope to have a blog or an interactive platform where they can, where the vaccine injured, whether it's childhood or COVID vaccine, can really touch base with each other, share information, and provide support, because I think being seen and feeling heard is so important. But as we're just trying to take one little step after another, because we are really just people. We're just people. And we said, in the words of Andrew Wakefield, either I can do nothing or I can do something, and I choose to do something.
Amen. That, you can't say it any better than that. Well, we are unfortunately out of time. I feel like we could definitely talk for so much longer about all of these topics, but thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your incredible insight. And we will make sure that we include your website and all of your social media links in our show notes that will accompany this episode when it goes to podcast.
Great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And that is all the time that we have for today, friends. But remember, we are here on the air 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can also catch the encore at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please be sure to tune in and listen to myself and my amazing sister nurses. As we walk you through all of these hot topics, we will empower you with information and education. We will advocate and we will stand in the gap for you, because we are nurses and this is what we do. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton, and you can find me here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless. Remember that we are in a war for truth. We are putting out a bounty on the real misinformation and exposing the purveyors of propaganda. No topic is off limits as we shine our lights and expose the darkness.
It's time.